Hello, everyone. Welcome back. If you've been to these before, we'll just wait a couple of minutes. Hopefully, I think we understand we've had over close to 250 register. So we'll just give others a chance to join. And I will test my tech. All right. 60 more seconds, and then we'll make a start. Thank you to those who have joined so far on time. Very grateful.
Oh, just a minute.
To share my screen. Okay, can I check that you can see something that says Module 3, CQC compliance becoming the norm? Can't see any of my scribblings on. Brilliant. Thank you very much. You can hear me okay? Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Right. We have, how many people have joined? 74. So let's make a start. As per the others, I'm going to try and make this as relaxed and enjoyable as possible, or as much as we can in the current climate. I'll just start the slides and then we'll go from there. Okay, so wrong slide. There we go. So that's the main front page. So, okay, so just a reminder, a number of you will have seen this before, so I won't spend a lot of time on it, but just to introduce ourselves, it's not just me here on today's session, but I have a wonderful team who, many of whom will be on as well. So they may well have something to say during this session, but we certainly work as a team, and if there's anyone specifically needs some support with outside of this meeting, then there's a few of us that you could contact, but we'll come on to that. Housekeeping again, you will have seen this slide before, but just for a refresh, if it's the first time you've joined us, usually you're all asked to switch your cameras off. Not here if you'd like it on. feel free if you want to have your lunch, etc. That's fine too, no pressure. But you know, no rules around that at all. We will share all the slides. We are going through a lot of additional resources today, and all of those will be shared with you following the session. And actually what I think I'll do is set up a Teams folder, and then I can give that to GP Excellence, and then you can join that. And then that means if we refresh, if we add, then, you know, we have some opportunity to do that. We'll be recording it, and we are recording it just for others to either use it for a playback, or if they haven't been able to join us today, and we'll leave the chat on. And we'll plan to look at that every once in a while. And as I always say, try and use this time for you to down tools, stop, listen, absorb yourself in it. We know it's a bone of stress for everybody, especially with the announcements of the new sort of quick fire rounds. So, you know, try and focus and you know, have that sort of mindset as we progress. So again, a recap. Why are we doing this? We're an LMC. We have, like you, a million other things to do with this time, but for us this is just so fundamental to keeping general practice thriving, not just surviving, being on the front foot rather than the back foot, and having that confidence. So it's a really important area for us to try and help as many of the practices across GM with. We want you to have the solid foundations which enable you to do things in a very high quality, effective and safe way as standard. To help create, as you know, we've had this series very much focused not just on the what, but the how and the culture, because we've learned through the last couple of sessions, you know, the difference between a closed culture to one that is far more transparent and open and understanding. And for us to ultimately help you achieve regulatory compliance, and it's embedded into everything you do, not just by a few people in the practice, but by everybody, and not just for an inspection, but as standard all of the time, to take that sense of urgency and overwhelming doom that you may well get a phone call at some point to say they're coming in. So it's that we're absolutely clear and continuing to take this series forward on that. So what have we covered previously? Conscious there might be people that haven't been on this before. If I can encourage you to have a look at the recordings, not that I particularly enjoy watching or listening to those back personally, but the content is absolutely relevant, and this is a series that's built on each one. So jumping in at this stage and not having seen those, you know, you might lose some of the context that we've had before. So we covered in the last module the core characteristics of an unhealthy culture in the practice, whether that's behavioural and the structural red flags that we see. And some of you spoke about that as well when I asked how that presents itself. The impact on the practice day to day, but the individuals as well. What we talked about, what allows that to persist. And also understanding the foundations of a positive culture. So starting to think about things slightly differently. We looked at what an inadequate practice looks like and feels like. And then we went into a deeper dive into safe and effective staffing. And we talked about the what and the so what. And we're going to just touch on that again in some of what we talk about today, and the deeper dive into monitoring and improving outcomes. So what those, just to refresh people's mind, in that pack and in that session, we looked at some of the real key processes, systems, documents. So when it comes to looking at staffing, for example, it was in the broad way of recruitment, competence, workforce planning and risk management, which is the key to sort of really demonstrating culture. and also around the well-being and the psychological safety of your workplace that people come to every day, and their safety in that sense. So again, that's in the previous one. We then looked at what were the tools, what were the systems that you would need within your practice to be able to make sure that wasn't just tokenistic words on a page, but actually happening in reality, and that you could evidence it, because a lot of systems that practices have in place are really quite something, but when you're living and breathing it, you don't always recognize that. Whereas if I was to come in and see something that I don't see anywhere else, that sort of thing needs to be celebrated. So sometimes, it's having a look at what you're doing really well as the other things where you feel you need to improve. We then also, so in the same example, looked at the what for monitoring and improving systems. So this is just a refresher for you all of the sorts of things we're talking about, and bringing different sections of what you might consider individual things into one space and one set of outcomes, meetings, etc. So all of that has been shared before, and we are going to build on this for you as well as we further the toolkit. So where do we start? Well, the first thing to do is remember to not panic. It's easier said than done, isn't it? But really, you've made the time here today. You've clearly got motivation to either measure what you're already doing against something different, or start to really get your head around it. So don't panic, because a stressed brain is not a productive brain. Don't view, and this is a message to all the teams, not just the people on the call, don't view CQC as a separate or standalone to-do list. As soon as we start to do that, it becomes an overwhelming separate piece of work, and it really isn't or shouldn't be anymore. So as it says there, remember CQC focuses on continuous improvement and compliance, and it's an embedded culture, not a one-off event. So long are the days gone where it was, you've got your 2 weeks notice, they're going to start trawling. We are seeing, and I'm going to touch on this towards the end of the session, what the new CQC is going to look like as an organisation. And then, look at some of the new frameworks that are under consultation currently, because things have appeared to be changing yet again. However, we know the underlying work that goes on within a service is not changing. It's just rebadging it as some other things. And as I've always said, don't view CQC just as your responsibility, nor as someone else's problem, because that is when, things can break down and it can become very, very difficult. So take a breath, and where we're going to start is around considering what is working well in your practice. What are the team's strengths? Because there will be lots and lots of things. The sorts of things we can think about is what takes up more of your time and energy than it should. So those common things that you're just consistently thinking, not this again, and starting to make tangible lists of things that need to be looked at as a team overall. What takes your team longer than you'd expect it to? And we can look at, getting into that in a little bit more detail and getting under it. What worries you? What doesn't worry you? And why doesn't it worry? What is it that's different about that area that you feel completely in control of, and that you nail it compared to other things? And looking at how that can, be a progression and aspiration for every area of what you do. What your shared goals are is really important. In the short, medium and long term. And it really starts with some of what we're going to talk about, taking it, calling a meeting with your leadership team, whatever you view that as in your practice, whether it's a partners meeting, whether you've already got specific meetings set up, but it's about starting somewhere. So what do you want to achieve? This is how you'll start to think about it before, you know, you all meet together as a leadership team. What is it? And you can discuss this at that meeting as well. So presumably it might be a shared understanding of a way of working, which will result in compliance, but as default, that is absolutely the norm. That probably involves, and you might be aspiring to, shared ownership and accountability, open, learning, focused, constructive environment where staff feel safe, including yourself, to raise concerns or put forward ideas. Decisions made based on evidence and data. This is the big focus of CQC going forward, and I can't stress the importance of it enough. But also with that transparency and rationale as to why you're choosing to do something. What is the data telling you? Less time spent dealing with internal issues and complaints. Great. Who wouldn't want to aspire to that becoming the norm? And a consistent and inclusive communication. But what does that really mean? Are your goals around consistent application of working practices to create certainty and avoidable risk and reduce that risk? Working less reactively, more proactively, feeling really resilient as an organisation. And of course, everyone understanding what they're doing, why they're doing it, and the impact of not doing that has. So if we just focus on some of those in a more sort of tangible way, I've put together some ideas around short-term goals, medium and long-term. So in terms of immediate goals, so if you know that there is some work to do and you're really up for it, but you need everybody on board and you need the backing to do that, then it's around the next 3 months, stabilising, reducing the risk and creating clarity. There will need to be some sort of baseline assessment done, partners owning their responsibilities as well. And I'm not saying they don't. I'm sure we've got lots of partners on the call that absolutely do. They understand what's at stake. But you know, certain behaviours, certain things become ingrained. And it might be that somebody's new to partnership and they very much worked in more an employee's role and mentality. And it's that evolution of understanding, you know, the stakes are high as a partner and that it's something that has to be owned at partnership level. Operational clarity, and in that first 3 months it's about fixing the high risk areas once you've identified it and done a little bit of a baseline assessment. The medium to term goals, so this isn't about things happening overnight and feeling that panic. This is about slow and steady and having some medium goals. So over that 3 to 12 months, the suggestion really would be around embedding consistency, so processes, making it more systematic and in a measured way, reducing the variation and demonstrating improvement. So that would involve, and we touched on this previously as well, repeatable systems, looking at your workforce and the capabilities, patient experience, so what is the feedback that you're getting, and using that to take things in either a different direction or reinforcing what you already do. Excuse me. Learning and improvement and data quality. The long-term goals is around that positive culture, the resilience at people level, practice level, system level, and that continuous improvement. And the sorts of things we'd be looking at is having the QI, the quality improvement culture, embedded governance, workforce sustainability, digital maturity, and the patient-centered design. So what I've done is I've put this into sort of broken it down a little bit. So in order to have the time and the space amongst the day job there has to be some acknowledgement that as a collective, as a leadership team, you want something to change. So what the partners, along with the practice manager or the business manager, really ideally would have the partners agree to what your goal is. Presumably the overarching goal, even if it's not small and broken down into other ways, it's a sustainable, low risk operating model that you want, where the people that need to know things can have instant oversight, look at the what, but the so what as well. Have a roadmap as well, create a roadmap to achieving the goal, because we know it, as I said, it isn't just going to happen tomorrow. There's going to have to be a program of work towards that end goal. So it will involve in the first few months risk tolerance and escalation routes. So if something's discovered, knowing where that goes, how it goes, what's going to back up that it is a problem. The ownership, so we're going to come to look at all the different domains and ownerships, but having partner ownership for each domain overarching. Resourcing is going to be required for baseline work and urgent fixes, whether that's infection control, safeguarding, medicines, etc. You know, this is really hard to fit in around the pressures of the day-to-day, and it's going to require some additional time, depending on your time frame, of course, and how you're going to chunk it up. An agreement, you would need your partners to agree and commit to deliver a 12-month or a 24-month, whatever fits right for you, a reform plan, because that's what this is. This is about reforming what you do to come through, experience some of the discomfort practices feel when they're already got an amber or a red in certain areas. What we're trying to do is mitigate that for as many of you as possible, that feeling of dread of we've had this, where do we go from here? This is about a proactive approach for as many of you as we possibly can. Medium priority is the 3 to 12 month mark. If 12 months is your sort of initial endpoint, is the organizational model and workforce development that you need to become embedded. So your governance cycle, that's not as sophisticated as it sounds, and we'll come on to that. The clinical leadership roles and the responsible others. And the prioritization and mobilization of work programs. So grouping things together, making them make sense. This is just a suggested list and a way of doing that. You might think, well, we already do this. We just call it something else. Absolutely fine. This isn't about rewriting anything that is working for you. It's just a sense check, or it might be helping you start and move forward. So the prioritization and the mobilization will be around access and workflow, clinical things, complaints, etc. All the things listed there. There's very few things that sit outside of those key headings. Longer term, because let's face it, this is a journey, a never-ending journey in a way, because you're going to be constantly, once you've got the absolute fundamentals in place, you're going to evolve. You're going to feel secure enough and in control of what your everyday is, that you then make the headspace and have the headspace to take it into what else do we want to do differently. And that will be around succession. I should say success planning, but the two are interchangeable. Succession planning, the digital maturity, and that's going to include AI. And we know there's a lot of uncertainty about that at the moment. And LMCs across GM are working really hard to try and bring some clarity to practices, because it is a little bit of a minefield, and it's working through that. Population health driven service design, and also, let's face it, the NHS is going through constant reform, and we're at that point now where things that the papers are being ripped up, and to some extent it is going to look very different in the next 5 years. And for me and your sustainability practices, it's going to be about coming up and out of what you see and do every day and really becoming very aware and proactive about what you and your peers could be doing differently in order to secure additional funding going forward. And that's going to be the driver through the neighbourhood leadership and beyond typical delivery. And we may well at some point put a session on, or one of my peers in another LMC might, around what that is, if it's something that you've not really had the headspace to get your head around. So probably enough talking just in the abstract way. What I want to do now is bring it into sort of some tangible things. So we're going to go through a suite of templates that practices. You can adapt them, you can adopt them as they are, you can say, no thanks, we've already got something and it works perfectly well for us. All of those is absolutely fine. This is just providing some structure. What we're going to cover is a more in-depth set of tools for one area in particular, as we absolutely believe it's going to be a constant theme. We know full inspections that have been done. We've been privy to some of the early reports of those, because the practices have shared them with us. And this is quite a strong focus, specifically around supervision, competency, and education becoming absolutely, the norm for all staff. What we've got, as I've said, it's not obligatory. It's not a full set of anything and everything you could ever need, nor do they guarantee CQC compliance at inspection. However, they're there as a sense check, as a starting point. We have put them all together at the moment in one Excel document. They're not intended to remain in one Excel document necessarily, because some are related to workforce, which you know better than I, are sensitive. So, but we've put them in one so people can go on, download it, and then they can chop and change, move things around as they see fit. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I've got to bring up another document. Have we got anything that anybody wants to just put their hand up and ask at this moment? Or are you happy for me to keep going? Hopefully you're all still there. I haven't fallen asleep. So I'm going to share a different document with me. Okay, so the practices that I work for now across my areas will have seen this previously, has been refreshed. So don't think you're just sitting through the same again, that it has been expanded and modernised in the last month. So hopefully there'll be something new there for you if you have seen it before. So what we've got is that Excel spreadsheet, very basic, nothing too complex, but it's got some of the key things that would be a starting point for you. And I'm going to go straight into, I'm going to ignore the first two tabs, which says queries and documentation, because I want to refresh those into something more usable and friendly and relevant. But I'm going to start with practice leads. Now, some of you, sorry, I just need to move something on my screen. There we go. So typically, in terms of this practice leads, most practices have one registered manager. Although when I went on yesterday, I did see two names on some practices sections on CQC, but they're recognised by the CQC as the individual responsible for ensuring both their own compliance and that of the practice. Now, in some practices, and I know this from experience, it's a perception that this is a responsibility of CQC compliance that lies solely with the registered managers, or in some, if it isn't the PM, it's delegated in part or entirely to the PM. Not saying that's across the board, but there will be practices that doesn't happen. However, as previously sort of emphasised through the 3 modules, achieving a rating of good or above from the CQC requires a far broader collective approach. It's not a singular or standalone process. So as such, this sort of document, whether it's in this style or another, strongly advocate for assigning each significant area of responsibility to a partner within the practice, because ultimately they're the contract holders. This does not mean, so partners on the call, don't panic, this does not mean that you must personally perform every task that's involved in that area. Of course, it would be unrealistic to think that. But it is about having accountability to their fellow partners for the effective, safe and compliant operation in their particular area. So this is the sort of very simplistic page you might choose to use. Again, the areas are example areas. You might change those around, but it's about everybody knowing what everybody is doing. And this is something that you could look at in one of the first series of meetings in that 3 months where you're doing the baseline. It's who is going to be the responsible partner in the practice. If you're a single-handed, unfortunately, there's going to be a lot against your name because, there's fewer people to take that overarching responsibility. However, we're not expecting, as I said, the partner to be doing everything. There's absolutely the right thing to do is to have that delegation as well. So you might then have clinical leads within your practice that are going to support you and be responsible for delivery against those particular areas. You'll, of course, need your non-clinical leads as well. That might be your practice manager. For some, it might be somebody else within the non-clinical team as well. And then really, dotting the I's, it's having about leave cover. So some of these things would be fine, left for a couple of weeks with nobody having an eye on something, others less so. And it's about having on here a very easy to see who's responsible for what, and that you've thought about leave cover, because this document is really about holding the reins around everything that would be expected of you as a practice to be able to go to, say, this is who's doing what, this is how often we meet, this is the way in which we're analysing the data and then making changes, very considered changes. You then might choose to have a work plan, very high level work plan of what that's going to look like through the quarters of the year. And indeed, you may be looking at having clinical area covered too. It depends how you work, but ultimately there would need to be somebody responsible for the different elements with then others supporting that process. So if I move on to practice meetings. So again, not all of you will have a document such as this, but you are likely to hold regular scheduled meetings. If you might have a calendar that you all use, and it's a shared calendar, you might have a document like this. But it's really important to give assurance and oversight that you've thought about it, you've prioritised your meetings, and it's not just by chance that they're happening. It's a deliberate crafting of that governance. And this is what we talk about, the governance cycle within your practice. So relevant staff members are informed of the timing and the topics discussed within these meetings. However, building the right culture means it's important to consider how discussions, the decisions that you make, the acquired knowledge, and how is that then going to be disseminated and communicated, because it will inadvertently and indirectly benefit pretty much everybody in the team in different ways. And it's also trying to indicate and show and have the reins around this of the intersection between these different areas, and I'll come on to explain that a little bit more. The leadership team as well absolutely needs to be aware of the potential gaps. Is there something that isn't being addressed in whatever meeting, whatever you call them, that is being picked up as a problem? So it's good to know from the outset what your structure is going to look like, where things will be reported to, and who will be attending. And of course, having somewhere that you can collect the links that take people who have sight of this document straight to that folder, and it's easy to access. Whether that's every week at a meeting, whether that's when you've got CQC standing over your shoulder asking for something, it just makes it very clear and easy for everybody. There's probably, I can't see your faces, but there may well be people who feel this approach is overkill. And let's face it, having the first two pages that I've shown you isn't going to transform your practice culture. It isn't going to, make or break things, but it is one of several very straightforward steps towards developing that clarity and the cohesion that you need in your practice, to give you the control that you want, rather than working in a reactive way and that firefighting way. It brings accountability and oversight. It's available if you're on leave to others who have got permission to look at it, or when things are needed urgently. And it's kind of sounds a little bit cheesy, but it's the small pieces within a jigsaw which allow the full picture to be seen. Solutions that we create, they don't have to be intricate and overly technical. They can be very basic, and that's okay. Okay, so I'm going to move on to the next page. Recruitment. We know this is long-standing, never really goes away, absolutely key, one of the first places people go to. So what we want to do is make sure it's proactively set up in a way that works for you, that works for your leadership team, where you absolutely know what's red, what's green, what needs to be focused. And the idea is to have a sea of green, because you absolutely have done what you needed to do, because some of these are very much done once, some are reoccurring and refreshing. I'm acutely aware that many of you will commission something, or have had commissioned for your practice to use, whether that's TeamNet, whether that's some other system. By all means, put in the chat what you currently use, because I think while some people will have something, others might not, and it'd be really good to start to see what those are, and share that amongst you. But on here is a very quick and simple checklist. It contains all the personal information, the bank details, the employment details, start date, whether the contract's been signed. On each of the ones, there's a drop down that I've factored in, where it's completed, whether it's requested, whether it's outstanding. I've tried to up my technical skills and put in some conditional formatting for you as well, so we've got that color coded. Further down, there's around the supervision and competency and training. Some of that is one-off, some of that is like an induction is set. You'll get to the point where that's achieved and you've moved on to the next thing. And some of the things that continually need refreshing will come into one of the other logs. Appraisal date. But seeing this, some of you, I first created this probably 10 years ago, when the majority of practices that I was going in to support opened the filing cabinet, got the files out. I'm guessing pretty much all of you have digitalized those records, and have done for some time. But who's to say that you all have? It depends on whether you've had the time to do that, whether that's been a priority. But this is certainly one way of putting all that information that's sitting in, whether it's a paper file or a digital file, into one space. Again, there'll be other ways of doing it. But what we do know is it's always been a key interest, and that's not going to be going away. And because it's one of the things that they typically look at, if there's some red flags in here, if there's some key things that are missing, that is going to make the antennae twitch quite significantly. So they will then go from this into other things. So, you know, this is really, if it isn't something that you're doing, whether that's through a third-party software or even in a basic form like this, that would definitely be on one of your high-risk areas and in the priority space. That you can obviously have for as many staff as you have, and it would be protected and considered confidential. If I then move on, I've created something very similar. And again, you might decide to integrate this into the form before. There was a line about appraisal, but this is taking it a step further. So appraisal, we know, is an absolute requirement. It's something that you need to be doing for your staff to be able to give your registered manager the assurance that they need to give that they're delivering against their obligations and the regulation of being an employer. So we've created this. It does again have some conditional formatting in there. So I've put a line across the top that's manual entry or drop down. So if I go to the drop down on column C, you can pick who it is that you're filling in on, and I know it says GP partner there, but I'm going to come to that later on in the discussion. Manual entry around the line manager, because that is likely to vary, but that could be customized. The start date, because obviously it's an every 12-month rolling program, and then as soon as you start filling those columns out, you'll get the autofill, and it will tell you how many days till the next one, and then you've got the color coding. My suggestion would always be have your links embedded in whatever it is you're using, and then you've got your section for notes. But what this does, it gives whoever the key leaders are overseeing this area of responsibility a very, very quick oversight of everybody rather than going into individual folders. And it certainly would give, an indication if there was a problem in a particular team or you were kind of getting behind on certain staff. So that's to do with appraisals. I'm then going to bring up one that I've created for training. Okay, and I fully aware that this is something that you are likely to have through a third party already, whether that's Bluestream or TeamNet or somebody else. But if you don't, here's one we made earlier. It has been refreshed. The focus on it really is around mandatory training, because I still know there can be confusion around that. What do we have to be doing? What is aspirational? So I've done some recent digging clarification on what is considered statutory, but also mandatory. And these are the ones that I've ended up settling on: the staff groups, the frequency, and also I've gone through each of these on e-learning for health, and I've embedded the link. Now, again, you might have a different way of doing it, but you might want to measure what you've got. If you look at this and think, well, we've got this and so much more, let me know. I'm not precious about these things, but it's about just making a start. At the bottom as well, we've got around other areas. So we know the whole sexual safety in the workplace. Looked on e-learning for health, there isn't any training on there for that at the moment, yet you've all been told that you need to be compliant with the regulation. And recently, the ICB wanted you to do that by signing up and saying that you were compliant with the NHSE charter. Well, we as an LMC, that was over and above what your actual statutory and mandatory requirement was, and we expressed that back to the ICB, and certainly our practices soon became aware that they didn't have to do that return. But I put it in there because it is likely to be training required at some point. We've then got the very specific ones for different clinicians, so a starter for 10 as well around those. But again, put in the chat if you're using something, chances are others are, but it would be great to get a sense check of what is working well, what systems are working well for you. But if you don't have anything, then you've got this as a starter for 10. Now, the next section that I'm going to come on to is the one that I really would like to spend a little bit more time on. It's becoming a significant area of scrutiny in the CQC visits. So what we, of course, want to do is try and get you feeling in control and that you've got your systems in place before anybody comes knocking, just so you know that things are running smoothly. Spent quite a bit of time on this as an LMC, and we did touch on some of the details of this in seminar 2, but felt that it does require a little bit more going over. So what we've created, and this is based on guidance that was available through NHSE, and I need to find the link and put it in this so you can go to it directly. But basically, and some of you might think, well, we do this already. You're telling us something we absolutely do and know, but it's just making sure. So there are aspirations and expectations around supervision. And there's different types of supervision, as you will know better than I will, but there's the day-to-day supervision. What if you've got an immediate problem, you're clinical and you need some advice? And this is what NHSE is saying is what you should be having in place. So different staff groups have different people to go to. And I suspect a lot of you do have that already. We've then got the induction supervision. The aspiration would be that's happening just in the first couple of weeks as part of the induction programme, but that is around, you know, making sure you've got everything you need to do the job that you need to do, making sure you're booked onto certain key things, and we'll come on to that a little bit more. They then call it something called enhanced early stage supervision. So once you've had your inductions and you're starting to deliver your role and get into the swing of things, that you have some enhanced. So it might be slightly more regular, it might be weekly, and it's for certain areas. You've then got your clinical and professional supervision. So this is something some of you might already do in practice. You might have one of the GP partners responsible for leading on supervision and competency checks for a particular group, say your nurses group. Now, some of this would be one-to-ones, but some of this might be group. And that opportunity to meet, discuss, to oversee, to look at what some of the issues have been over that last month, bring case studies to review. And then the other side of this is the educational supervision as well, which will be dictated already by some, like in the PCM roles, but really as a minimum, we would be expecting that to see for the clinical roles quarterly. We then have a section there around competency sign-off and that requirement. So here's some examples, because there's nothing worse than being told something so abstract, but these are the sorts of things. Now, you might have staff that have been in place for years and years. Appreciate that. Don't want to insult anyone by doing it, but really in terms of just making sure there's absolutely no gaps. you know, it's something that I would suggest that you consider. Within this, although we wouldn't normally have this in the template, I have put the useful links. So these are all the myth busters for each of those areas that you can just click on and go to, whether it's R's, AMPs, and where I found other helpful frameworks, I've put those in as well. So there's skills for health, which is a little bit like skills for care. But they give a general practice nursing framework. Now, again, that will be down to individual view, but what this is about is assuring that your staff, that you're regulated to do for the services that you provide, have the right skills, are doing them competently and responsibly, and that you can give that assurance. And the biggest change we're seeing is CQC really want deep dive work on this to show that the demand that your practice is placed under by patients day in, day out is effectively and safely staffed in order to deal with that. And this is all part of your evidence, that it's not by chance or coincidence that you have this many AMPs or this many salaried doing something to this, you know, set of protocols. This is showing that everything you're doing is considered, and you might do that automatically, but it's having this backing it up that it's happening. So I created this table. Again, you might think, good grief, how am I supposed to find the time to do this? But if it's filled in once, it's about maintaining it. And it might be that each supervisor is responsible for each part. So this isn't one document that only one person can access. This is about multi-access document to the relevant people. So you would have your staff member start date role, of which I've populated some of those again. The dates, you start typing anything, the calendar will pop up. You've got the drop down, which are populated, whether it's completed, ongoing, overdue. So obviously, unless you've got lots of new starters, that would have been completed. And you can, you know, say confidently that that has all been done. Same with the enhanced early stage, where those are going to come into their own is with new starters. And then looking at your clinical and professional supervision, you know, do you currently have those things in place for all of your clinical staffing groups? I suspect the answer is no. And I'm not sure you will have previously been really scrutinized on that, other than, you know, for certain groups. So this is really an area that they're going to be coming in quite hard on, I think. We've then got at the bottom your link to your file and the notes. So again, this isn't about having all the detail in this document, but it's a capture all. It's so you can easily see if there's any gaps in that overarching clinical supervision. Okay, appreciate that. That's a busy document and I've been talking a long time. So I'm going to move on to the next one. This is a new document that I've created very, very recently. And this is what I'm trying to turn something in from just a dashboard of the what. So you've got your previous ones that says, we've got everyone having supervision, everybody's been inducted, we know everyone's qualified to do it because we check their NMC and GMC registration every 3 years and we can log it that it's been done. You've got all the what's. This is about the so what's, this particular document. Now for me, this is where it all starts to piece together. When I talk about those interdependencies between your different areas within your practice, this is the bit that really takes you from a good to that whole next level. And this is where it's becoming that digital maturity. Now, I created this one. I would love to go away over the next couple of months and create as many as we can for you as well. It will take time, but, you know, here's a starter for 10 on this particular area. So you will have your series of meetings scheduled. You will know who is ultimate responsibility for that area. You will know who is supporting that piece of work, and you know you're going to be meeting them every, whether it's week, month, bi-monthly, quarter, whatever you've decided to put in your structure. But this is about, when we looked at the plan, the goals for the first 3 months, the next 9 months and beyond, where I talked about maturity of the digital type, this is where this comes in. So don't, feel overwhelmed by it. But if we just take that example that I've put in, so one thing that they are really keen to see evidence of is staffing levels consistently meet patient demand across clinical and non-clinical areas. So that is what you're committing to do, and this is your way of evidencing it. You've got your RAG rating, so you've done your baseline, you've looked at, what do we have on that? Do we have anything on that? Are we looking at it? Absolutely, I'm sure you are, but you can then put your RAG rating. Evidence. So where is your evidence? Weekly analysis of capacity and demand. So that may well be sitting in a different work stream and being done by somebody else, but it's feeding the relevance of that into the overarching workforce section. Evidence location link, we love that because it makes it very, very easy. Nobody can get lost or caught up in somebody else's filing system. They can go straight to it. Which meeting, at the practice is that being discussed at? I put there ops meeting, just as an example. It may not be called an ops meeting. It might be called demand and capacity meeting. It might be called something completely different. It's what is meaningful to you and your team, but it's showing that it's going somewhere. So the gaps identified: increased consistent demand on a Tuesday by looking at this morning for X, Y, and Z, that could be creating risk. So what are you going to do about it? The rota might change to upping X, Y, and Z, patient comms. You might be talking to your patients that you're seeing this peak, and there might be things that they could be doing and accessing differently. There might not, but at least you're thinking about, is there anything we need to tell patients? Do we need to talk to the PPG group, get some feedback? And then whatever it is, that series of work comes to, it's about the staff briefing on the new process, on what you've learned through doing that and what you've implemented. And this is where CQC really gets very, very excited about how you're viewing it, what you're doing. You're noticing something, deliberately looking for it in the data. It's evidence-based. You've discussed it, you've looked at cross-cutting themes, and you've implemented it. Not only have you implemented it, you've communicated that change to all relevant people, which can be in a very simplistic way, and then off you go. And at some point, that's something that would be happening regularly, obviously, because it's going to be changeable, but there'll be the evidence of you doing that. Clearly not going to go through all of these to that level, but we've got appointment capacities monitored and adjusted using demand and capacity data. Contingency plans exist for sickness, vacancies and surges in demand. So we know in this year's contract, there is a real emphasis on same day appointments. You're going to be monitored on them. They're going to extract that data directly from GPAD. Now, if your mapping on there is not set quite right, that's going to put you under more pressure because your data is going to suggest you're not meeting that target. So that's an opportunity with that piece of work to make sure your capacity is fit for the demand of the new expectation, but it has to be done safely and it has to be done in a very controlled way. So there's various things. I mean, how many lines are there on here? 28. So not a small undertaking. However, this is something, by having the basic things in place, the structures in place, that mean it's on certain people's radars and job plan, and they're taking accountability, but it's not just sitting with that knowledge with them. There's other processes of bringing it together. So for me, rather than just give you a long list of the what, this is really making it a bit more tangible in that delivery. When I go back into the other document, I have got some other things that I will share and upload to whatever place we put them for you all. So, policies, the dreaded policy. Long again are the days gone when all you needed was a policy sitting somewhere that was in date and customised to your practice, sadly. The culture comes through very, very loudly with this element. You can have all the policies in the world that are absolutely tailored to your practice, but if they can't be felt and seen and evidenced within that daily working, that's when again the antennae is going to be twitching. So this, again, chances are you use Bluestream or something similar, so don't want to duplicate if something's working for you, but it's that overarching dashboard, because you know, there's so many times it might just be that one policy that somebody's not reviewed, and that's the one they look at, and it's just like, oh, give me a break. So this is about having that structured overarching space where you can see which work stream it is involved with or it contributes to. The owner, that might not be in every case the practice manager. This is going to have to be a far broader accountability. And it may well be when you've divvied up your individual areas that the policies for those come into that remit rather than it just be sitting in one person sort of in tray. Last updated in the review date. So that is, you know, the standard stuff. What I've incorporated in here because it's just easier to do. And again, this has been in existence for about 10 years, this particular template, is the importance about staff when they are given time to read a document. It's not about just the tick box clicking, is it? It has to be about whether they've read it, whether they've understood it, and whether they will and comply with it, because that is then putting the ownership on those members of staff rather than just, you know, yes, I've read it, but I didn't understand it. So some of these you will already have training to back up the policy because it requires more than just reading a document. But, you know, having a system in place where somebody reads it, is able to, it then goes green on your screen, but it's what are they committing to when they've read that? And if they haven't understood it, is bringing that to the right place in those regular supervisions. And then you will see themes. So long old list, how many lines do we have? 70 odd. Again, won't be everything. Some of you will be thinking, well, she's missed this, she's missed that. Absolutely. Let me know. Let's work together to make this a catch-all for everybody. So I'm almost there. You'll be glad to know on these particular things. This is something that comes up quite frequently, certainly has done in the last couple of years, is your 2-week wait referral fail-safe tracker. Not easy to say. So I thought I'd just put one together as simply as I possibly can. Now, you may well have processes in place that work for you, and everybody knows in that, you know, chain that people have within the process, everybody knows what they're doing. It's just that very top tier, having overarching view, assurance. One of the partners, and there'll be a clinical lead and a senior manager who will have ultimate responsibility for this. But in some respects, you know, you might have a workflow where each GP is responsible for doing this for the patients that they've referred. Again, that's fine, but really there needs to be a way of capturing this so the safeguards are in place. So it probably took me quite a while to decide how best to do this. I may not have it right for everybody, but gone for the patient name, clearly the NHS number, the date of consultation pathway. I've done a drop down. I've gone on to certain 2-week wait NHS recent documents and seen what they've got down. So I've taken those as the standard, but it could well be beyond that. The referral action booked by the patient. So you've raised that 2-week wait ask, might be with the patient in the room, because that's what some people I know do. It might be booked by the practice after the consultation's finished by somebody else within the practice, because that's what you have as an established process. Absolutely fine, but it would come under that category. Not yet booked, and defer to provider. So you've tasked them with doing it. And I understand through ERS there's different ways of doing that. So when did you do that? And when are you gonna check it? When are you gonna build into your workflow of that's being checked? Now, I could speak to probably 100 different people and I would probably get 101 different responses, but this is what I've put down. Doesn't mean you have to keep it, doesn't mean you have to do this much, but it felt safe to have some sort of checkpoint at your 7 days, your 14 days and your 21. Might not be all 3, but it would be a combination of some of those, because things can change. It's about what available information is there to you, because what we know is CQC have been really very hot about this over the last, say, 5 years. Because the referrals were sent in and they wanted assurance that you knew that patient had either been seen or not been seen. And then there was a chasing, even though it shouldn't be something that you have to do, they are making that your responsibility. So on the drop down, I've put a waiting update on the pathway, redirected, cancelled by patient, cancelled by provider. Depending on which ones you're going to pick there, you might put something in this. If they're on the pathway, you can see they're on the pathway. Nothing more to do on your 14 and 21, but you've got your escalation route if it's necessary, and the outcome and whether or not that's closed. Nothing more for you to do in terms of this process. So again, you might think, good grief, how are we going to instill this? But chances are you're already doing a process, but, you know, bring it into that assurance framework, because it's something that you spend time doing, takes energy, takes time, and it would be good to really get that recognition, but also that extra safety measure of having it in one place, whether it's in something like this or something different. Moving on to the last 3, you will all have your processes embedded for SUIs and complaints. These are not hugely different, so I won't go through both of them. But again, we know CQC best practice is not just about recording an issue, identifying it, maybe reporting it somewhere externally, like the learning patient outcome. I can't think what it's called now, the LFPSC, that's now a contractual requirement. There might be other things that you're obliged to do as well. But it's really what CQC are honing in on. One, you can absolutely see where they can have assurance that you're picking up these things, because there's nothing worse than a practice without any reported complaints or SUIs, because that is a red flag for them. So you've got your overarching document. You will have meetings around this specifically because it's such a detailed process, I'm sure already. But the thing that I've picked up over the years that they're really looking to see is it's the so what's changed. So you've done an investigation. What are the root causes? What's the learning that's been identified? What are the agreed actions? Have they been implemented? have you had a practice-wide PLT session to look at these? So everybody, their little bit of the jigsaw, they absolutely understand if something goes wrong at that point, it affects the whole piece. So it's about that accountability, that ownership, but it's basically understanding that what might seem as one task has consequences and impacts another. And really, what they're really keen to see is that it doesn't end there, that whatever you've implemented, when you've gone through all these processes, you review it. It might come back as part of your QI audit and your audit cycle. It doesn't have to sit in here in its own right. It can feed into that. But it's double checking, have we implemented what we said? Is it working? If it isn't, let's go through that process again. And that gives really strong assurance and foundation, but also so you know you're doing the right thing and the data is there to back it up. So we've got something very similar for complaints, as you'd expect. And then the last one in this particular series is the audit. Something that can be really overlooked, I think, because it's just, you know, it's that thing, isn't it? It's like finding the time. But again, this is where all the changes you may make over the next 12, 24 months, it's about testing them. They can become part of your audit. Of course, it's based on clinical elements and good practice and safe practice, and is very much related to clinical work and QOF and all of those things. But it can also be applied to processes and different ways of doing it. So I've written that line there. Practice currently has X active QI audits, Y completed, X overdue. Key areas of focus include, for example, prescribing access, long-term condition management, improvement works reviewed monthly. That is one of the key lines that you could put in your slide deck when CQC come in. You can have that in your slide deck. You can go straight to it and say, look, that statement is backed up by this. These are our processes we have in place. And it's a real seamless, we've said we do something, we can prove we do it. Here's what's changed, here's the evidence. So whilst it might feel like something else, everything we're putting in place here and using is about making things easier and more seamless and requiring less effort at the point when it's embedded. So I'm going to stop sharing, and just so you are aware, should you choose to go anywhere near this document, on the very last page currently is the data list for the drop downs. So when I've created that conditional formatting, you click on there and there's all the drop downs. So if, for example, and you know, I'm sure we could, you know, support with this somehow, but if there was somebody you didn't want in there or you did want in there, it's actually not too cumbersome to just take it out, and then it's customized for your particular needs. So it looks a bit crazy, but it's there for good reason. So I'll stop sharing that. And I'm conscious we're in the last part of this webinar now. And what I want to do is have a sip of water, but also bring back up the slide deck that I was showing earlier. Bear with me. So I'm just going to close that down. So, sorry. Okay, so a few more slides to go and then we're done. Okay, so I did mention when I was going through the supervision and competency section, I've created some templates. You might think, don't like them, don't want them, that's fine. But it's just in order to, again, get away from the abstract concept. So I have these in the Word document. Again, when we upload this to wherever we're going to put it and give you all access, we will upload these. The aspiration would be going forward is we have somewhere that you can all upload what it is you're using and doing and have that real shared repository and examples. But, you know, that might take time, but that would be our aspiration to do this, to make it accessible for all. So we've got, this is around a supervision schedule, pulls on some of that information in that particular table, and then it breaks it down it's just a little bit of a structure, not a policy, but it's an intent. It's showing your intent of what you will be doing. If asked of how do you make sure your staff have the right skills, you know, this is all part of that evidence. We've then gone on to create something that looks like this for each of the, there's a few different examples here, but a competency passport. Again, you may have access to something like this already, absolutely fine. Don't expect you to swap it out and do anything different, providing it's, you know, yours may well be more thorough than this, but it gives some very basic indications of what each of the types of workforce should be looking at, what you and the supervision and the competency checks can focus on. Just makes it a little bit more meaningful. And then the last one of those, I've missed one, which I will upload, but it's around salaried GPs. Now, I've had some debate about this. But I've come to the conclusion, whilst GPs are absolutely responsible for their own competency, having supervision, having external appraisal, in the sense of CQC, they're an employee. And as such, the registered manager and the partners, because obviously CQC compliance affects all partners, are obliged under the regulations to make sure all their staff have the right skills, are doing things in the right way, issues are flagged, training is provided. And in my mind, I don't understand why salaried GPs would be any different in that regard, because they're an employed member of your team. So I have created a couple of page document, which you may choose to look at and think, no thanks, or you might think, yeah, it's a starter for 10. And whilst this will be really controversial, in the same way you're responsible for your employees, there is perhaps an aspiration that there has to be some sort of sense checking between the partners as well, because, you know, things evolve, people have different responsibilities, people all have that responsibility of their own appraisal, revalidation, and it's just having a touch point, whether that's in your clinical meetings where you do it over specific disease areas or otherwise, is having that full sort of partner team sense check, looking at the guidance, making, you know, and this isn't about scrutinizing one another, but it's just about having that opportunity to do that collectively together. And you might decide to build that into that meeting, clinical meeting, even if it's once a quarter. But again, something to consider. So this I've put in because with all these things, it's all very well having an hour-and-a-half session. I've put together a slide, which is a little bit like a start of a briefing for your staff. And the simplest way to have done that is what's changing. So it's talking about CQC in very basic terms. It's not just looking at documents. It's not just looking at us as a spot check every 7 years. It's about they will be going in the background, looking in a continual way. And it's about everyone having a part to play in keeping the patient safe and the practice being somewhere where they want to be. So I've put in some suggested, if you're going to adopt that 12-month plan, having something similar. So tell your staff what you need to, what we need to do right now. So everyone needs to keep the training up to date, read the staff briefings, attend meetings if you're invited, follow policies consistently, and report concerns and incidents. So the very key basic things. What's coming over the next 3 to 12 months? So as you move through your sort of reform program, what they might see comes out of that is more structured supervision, clearer role competencies, regular audits and learning sessions, regular communication and new processes and systems to make things more efficient. Often when you've been running a particular system for a very long time and you start to maybe what might be perceived as being a little bit more hands-on or scrutinizing things, people can feel very threatened by that if they don't understand why you're doing it. You'll all know that better than I will. So it's about having that open conversation. The long-term vision is absolutely around everyone knows the system. It's clear processes that make work easier. This isn't about making anybody's life any harder. A learning of culture and not blame, better outcomes, and a place that everyone feels their voice is heard, every member of staff. So that is the vision, and I can't imagine any member of staff that would not think that was all a really positive thing to be happening. But how can they help now? And I've put down 5 different things, them asking if they're unsure, sharing ideas, keep your records accurate. That's, something that you can do right now, support one another and take part, see this as a positive change. So it would be remiss of me not to use the last few minutes to just bring this to your attention if you haven't seen it already. So we know CQC is constantly reinventing itself. It's going through its own reform and has been for quite some time. There's been people who have left the organisation at leadership level. They're actually looking for a new CEO as I speak and advertising for that. They are there's been 4 independent reviews done of CQC over the last year or so, looking at different things, and they're all making recommendations. One of which is, whilst the single assessment framework was a change of direction and probably has brought some benefit, what they've listened to is to say that not everything within each is tailored enough. So they're currently out to consultation on 4 further frameworks. And this is an example of one of them, the safety culture. So this is from the primary and community service assessment. It's a draft. What I've done is, because we don't have time to go through it, and it's live now, I put the link on the bottom to the consultation. So as part of the work where you're getting your head around this, that's probably one to share with certain people within the practice and just spend a few minutes having a look at that, even if it's together, because then you're getting information. What the really interesting thing about this is within each of these specific areas tailored to the discipline, so primary care is what rating characteristics, what they'd be seeing in an outstanding practice, a good practice, requires an improvement, inadequate. So the thing that we have spent some time on in previous sessions, and the thing that you all really wanted the most, was to know, how do you achieve good and outstanding? Well, CQC has started to do this for us. It's still draft, but it's there, so it's worth a few minutes of your time. Other references, just for the bigger context, that I wanted to share is in the, let me read the title, Fit for the Future 10-Year Health Plan for England, a nice snappy title. Some of you will be very familiar with the 10-year plan. It was revisited earlier this year. A subsequent version came out. This is where they talk about neighbourhoods, neighbourhood buildings, the whole system working differently, commissioning going to a different type of commissioning, and providers working together in that space. They also have these pages 92 through to 94. The link is there about what they're expecting CQC to look like during this evolution of the whole system. And it talks there very much about intelligence and data, and a lot of investment going into that to take out data from your systems routinely through a particular platform, and analyze it to give that live information rather than retrospective. So again, should form part of your meetings where you're looking at accepting that this is going to be an area of priority, but not viewing it in its own right, that it's cross-cutting. Last and not least, there's a slide here. So we know as part of their structure, they're doing the full inspections, but you will have all received the delightful email at the beginning of April, the end of March, saying, oh, next week CQC is coming to a bunch of practices locally. Some of you on the call will have had those yourselves. Some of you might be having them scheduled for next week, or you may not have had any sort of communication yet. But I know there's a group in GM of practice managers where you're sharing examples, and I think that's really so important. But some of the ones that we've become aware of, I've listed here. So it's the 10-step check, isn't it? So you're not necessarily going to be unlucky enough to get all of these, but these are taken from numerous visits where people have shared that with us. We understand that the meeting, although it's scheduled for like 5 or 6 hours, it's actually happening in 4, but they are looking at certain areas, many of which you can see, for example, on that last column, the staff, everything within that is what is in that spreadsheet that I put up before. So it was a really good sense check for me whether or not we're still looking and asking and suggesting you do the relevant things, and that link, that those log there, it gives me that reassurance that it is still very relevant. So no doubt those will still keep coming out. I urge you to, share with peers. If you're not on that group, then I'm sure that could be circulated as well with the information that will be coming out. So final few minutes, the next slide. So next time is the final webinar of the series. I think is it June? Maybe it's May. I think it's June. And what that's going to be is less of me sitting here talking at you and a little bit more interactive. So we're going to hear from practices who have either recently had a full inspection or the rapid smaller review that you're all aware of. We will share some further resources, and if we feel that they're ready to share with you sooner, we'll upload them rather than wait. And we can have a Q&A session as well, where we can have a bit of a panel between us, have some discussion. So I really look forward to having it in a different format next time. And before we go, if you can spend 2 seconds zapping that with your phone, giving us some feedback, because it's what allows us to improve what we do every time. So we would really welcome your honest feedback from you, and we'll send that out separately as well. So I'll stop sharing. We have got a couple of minutes. I'm sure you'd rather have that back, but if there are any questions, please feel free to put your hand up and ask. Hi, Efro.
Hiya, I just wanted to point out that a couple of people in the chat have asked about the resources that you've shared because they find them really useful.
Okay.
I know you mentioned that they'll probably be uploaded in due course, but I didn't know if you wanted to give a bit more of an update on that one.
Yeah, so I mean, as soon as we're done today, do a bit of tidying and they can come out to you as they are. What I'm very aware of is when we do that, they are at a point in time. So if we evolve, if we add more, as we would be doing for the people who are in our areas, our constituents, you're not going to get those changes automatically. So we can send them out, but on the understanding that if they evolve, you'd probably want the link or to join the group.
Very useful, thank you.
Okay. All right, everyone. Well, I hope you're still awake. I hope you're feeling okay, and we'll catch up again soon. All right, take care. Thanks.